Hello guys, and welcome to the next tutorial. In this one, I'd like to show you how to create a simple UI element in Adobe XD, and afterwards we're going to go ahead and use the new function of XD, which is File, Export, and we're going to use ProtoPie as our software of choice for prototyping. Instead of using this prototype tab, which is somehow limited, we're going to use ProtoPie, which is pretty advanced tool, but pretty straightforward as well. So let's go ahead and create our first artboard. I'm going to press A and I'm going to use web artboard. So let's rename it to maybe shop, and this will be a simple layout. I'm going to press R to create right pane, and let's use some dark background for that. And to the right hand side, we're going to have cart and also some description. And in the middle, I'd like to have collections with clothes. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and this is one of the few moments that you're going to use Photoshop as a UI designer. But if you want to extract something from the background, that's the tool you're going to use. So let's use the simplest tool. So this is a magic wand. I'm going to just simply click on the background and then shift click inside here. And now I can proceed to select and mask. So this is how I always start my selections with Photoshop. Either I use Magic Wand tool or this quick selection tool, which is pretty cool to create some rough selection. And then I go to select and mask interface and I refine this selection. Now we can select lasso tool and we can simply use lasso to extract this part. Actually, I'm adding this part to the selection, but this is simply because I selected the whole background, not the model. So if I want to include this band, I need to press Option, and with Option I can select it right here. Okay, now I need to refine this a little bit so I can tweak the radius. So this is usually what I do if I have some hair action going on. I can just adjust the radius, so now it looks better. And also the smoothness and feather, I can smooth and feather the edges of the selection just a bit. So I don't need like perfect selection, so I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And now I need to invert this selection so that I have the model selected. So I'm going to press Command-Shift-I to invert it. And now I can just simply copy with Command-C and go ahead and use it inside of Adobe XD. So I'm going to paste it here with Command-V. And this goes with the native size, but if I want the best size out there, I need to divide it by 2. So I need to have this retina ready graphics. So I just need to simply change the size, and maybe let's make it slightly bigger like this. I'm going to put it here, and I'm also going to use some text. So let's press T and use the text tool. I'm going to have summer here, and let's select it. I'm going to use circular font, and let's use some bigger font. But this is the way you do it. You simply use this point tool, and now you can click outside of the text and make it bigger. So this is pretty cool. And let's use V selection tool. Let's put it there and make it somehow bigger. Okay. Now I'm gonna duplicate it with Option, and I'm gonna say camp. For example, this will be summer camp collection. Let's change the color, some brightest one, and this is basically a simple composition. I'm going to put the summer behind the model. Let's rename it. All right, now let's move on to the right pane. I'm going to create another rectangle. I'm going to duplicate the first one. And now you can use this little eyedropper to select any color and use it for your object. And let's put it here. I'm also going to select the layout, the artboard itself, and change the field so that I can separate it from the card like this. And now let's use the text tool to create the text. This will be your card text, and I'm going to change the color to this dark color. And also what I'd like to do is just put it like that, and I'm going to duplicate it, and there will have a price. So for example, there is a price of 0 right now. Let's duplicate this field once more. I'm going to use Option-Shift to create a copy, and I'm going to align it to the right hand side and also use a white color for the text, and this will be your sizes. Now I'd like to create some rectangles here. Let's use the first one like this, and let's change the fill and the border. I'm going to use white border with 3 pixel stroke, and inside of this I'm going to have text. So let's copy and paste this once more and change the text color to white. And also I'm going to have some bigger font, so let me do it like visually. I'm going to start from 36, which will be the first size. Let's center it, and we're going to select those guys. I'm going to maybe make it this a little bit smaller and select those guys. Let's group it all together with Command G, and Command R will let us create a repeat grid. So let's create a repeat grid. This will be 38, and then we'll have 40 and 42. Now let's ungroup it. So I'm going to select repeat grid once more and Command Shift G ungroup it so that I can select individual items, and now I can use white fill for the selected size. And also I'm going to use this group and press Command 3 to zoom into it, and then use the line tool. I'm going to create a line like so. Let's use the 3 pixel border width and white color for it so that we can have an inactive state, and let's make sure that it goes to group 1. This will actually be the fourth one. This will be 3, 2, and the first size. And as for the fourth one, we're going to create like opacity of 30%. I'm going to press 3 on the keyboard. Now we can press Command 1 to go back to 100%. Now let's create a description for the collection. I'm going to select this once more, and let's say summer camp here. Also, I'm going to make that bigger, like so. Let's align it to the grid. So I don't have a proper grid here, but as you see, I'm trying to fit everything in the line so that I have everything really nicely organized in the layout, and it looks really solid. So let's use the line here, and I'm going to create one additional element that will be aligned to the grid as well. And let's make it 3 pixels and maybe 2 pixels wide line. Let's put it here, and now I'm going to create a description. So again, I'm going to duplicate with Option drag this field, but this time I'm going to use slightly smaller text size, so maybe 20 or 21. And let's put it there. Instead of the point text, I'm going to change it to the text area, and I can now expand it like this. Let's align it to the left. I already have the text, so let me select it from the text file. And this is the summer collection description. In the text file, I'm simply going to drag and drop it onto the text field. And here we have it. Let's slightly change opacity. I'm going to press 4 or 5 to change the opacity to 40%. And now we have the base of our layout. What I'm going to do in a second is create another collection. So I'm going to have one more photo, but this will be basically the same steps that we had. So I'm going to just skip it and show you the result. Okay, and once more with the magic of the cinema, we have another artboard. So I duplicated the artboard and I've added another collection. This is simply a different image and different text, but apart from that, everything is the same. So I need to be able to change those collections, and I want to do it with simple pagination that I'm going to add to the bottom. So let's create a small rectangle here, like so, and this will be the first page. So let's use text and also put 1 here. I'm going to select it and move it to the center of this element. Let's select them both and group them in the repeat grid. I'm going to repeat it and change the margin slightly, like so. This will be the second one, and this will be the third one. Let's change the opacity back to 100, and let's create another state. So this will be active state, and we need inactive state. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to hide this for a second and Command Shift G ungroup it. Now let's delete the texts inside. I'm going to Command click and delete them. And now we have to select all those items and simply make them smaller. So we have 3 inactive states and also 3 active states. And this is pretty important so that you create all the states for the items, because usually you'd create only one state that will be active to showcase the active state and then 2 inactive states. But this is really a better way to do it in order to create a prototype later on so that we have all the items available for us. And speaking of the elements that are available, it's best to have a good naming convention for them as well. So let's now try to select all the elements that will go to the same groups. So let's group it all together, and this will be summer description. Let's go ahead and duplicate it, and this will be flower description. And we're going to borrow some text that we have here. So let's Command minus zoom out a bit, and this will be flower power here. And also we're gonna say, yeah, we're gonna change this one in the flower description. So we have two descriptions. We can hide it for a sec. And now what we're gonna do is also one more element. I'm gonna use the line tool and create a simple hamburger icon. So this will be 2 pixels border. I'm gonna create a repeat grid with 3 items, and let's do it like this, Command-Shift-G ungroup, and here we have it, a simple icon. Okay, so we're gonna select these elements and create a menu group for them. Also, what we need to select are those items, and this will be, so for example, let's name it main collection 1, okay? And here we have the card and the background. So this is card background, so white one, and this is black one. And now let's select the card items and also the background. I'm going to group them all together, and this will be card. We're going to use some more items in the card in a second. But now let's select sizes, and where is this repeat grid? Okay, so those are all the sizes. I'm going to shift click to select them, and also let's select this and group it all together, sizes. Okay, this is a bit boring process, but I want you to see it because then you realize that you know the structure that will go to ProtoPie. And this is pretty important that you know all the naming, structure, and conventions that we use here. So, okay, now what we're gonna do is create some card items, but also I'm gonna select all the items here like so, and group them all together and say that this is the right pane, okay? And if the card is open, we're gonna create this second state like this, and we'd be able to put some items into the card. So we'll need some visual clues that will allow us to select some item, for example, glasses, and put them inside the card. So let's create a simple ellipse like this with no border, and I'm going to duplicate it and make it bigger. And now we're just going to use 2 pixel border like this. So this will be our small indicator. Let's group it all together. This will be hint 1, okay? Now let's duplicate it, and we're going to use it for another products that we have. So for example, you can buy a t-shirt, and you can also buy this belt, okay? So this is the inactive state of our hints. And if we select this or we roll over this element, I'm going to duplicate it, and this will be our product. So let's go inside. I'm going to delete this outer ellipse, and I'm going to use this one, make it bigger like this. And I'm going to duplicate it because I want to use one of the ellipses as a mask for a photo. So I have photos ready-made. I can select the photo and let's put it here. Now we're going to select both glasses and the ellipse. And we can go to object, but we can actually make a mask. And I wanted to show you that because you have to make sure that those elements overlap so that you can create a mask. So let's put it there. Now we can command click and say object, and now mask with shape is available. So I only use the second ellipse so that we have white background all over it. So let's select this glasses, and maybe let's change the position slightly so we can better see this product. And if I select the product, I'd like to be able to add it to the basket. So we'll be able to drag this little product and put it inside of the cart. So now what we have to create is the contents for the cart. I'm going to create an empty state first because I have this really nice thing that will indicate that you can drop something into your cart. Okay, so this is drop items. And now I'm going to use those 2 graphics inside of the card. Let's put them there. And also make some simple descriptions. So let's select this and copy and paste it. This will be super cool glasses. And let's change the size. Let's make it smaller, like so. I'm going to duplicate it and maybe add $450 for those super cool glasses. And let's make this a little bit, yeah, like so. And let's create the second item, and this is fancy belt. Okay, and yeah, let's not be too cruel, and let's say 150. Okay, now maybe one more thing, a line between them, and let's stick to the grid. Let's move it there. I'm going to use 2 pixel border, and I'm going to press 1 for 10% opacity or 2 for 20. 20 is fine. Let's duplicate it and like this. Okay, now let's select those things together, and I need to also select the bullet photo. Let's put it inside the card, so I need to do it with glasses as well. Now let's Shift Command click and select the items and the line. I'm going to group it. This will be item 1. And the second item, let's select it. Okay, group it all together, item 2. So I believe that I have almost everything I need. So let's take a look at the product. I have hints. Let's maybe group them all together and say this is hints. So we have hints, products, we have menu, we have inactive and active state of the pagination. So let's group it together and say pages. And also the flower description, which is invisible, but we have to make it visible so that it can go to ProtoPie, but I'm going to show you that in a second. This is the hold right pane, and yeah, let's move it to the bottom, and we're going to move the flower description to right pane as well. Let's see it, okay. And we have sizes, which we have here, okay, and the whole card with the items inside. And yeah, this is pretty cool. This is all we actually need. One more thing is we need to copy and paste this second main 2 folder so that we can have everything in one artboard. So I'm just copying and pasting this, and if you want something to go into ProtoPie, you have to make it visible. So you have to have all the layers visible, and afterwards we're gonna hide them in ProtoPie. Okay, so we have everything in our first artboard, so let's go ahead and go to File and Export to ProtoPie. So you have to first download and install ProtoPie, and if you do so and you export the assets, you have this little box that will allow you to import any of the artboards. So we're going to have Shop Artboard imported in 2x scale, and let's leave all the settings as default for now. I'm going to import that, and the thing is that we have the wrong size of the canvas, so let's first go to Device and switch to desktop and this full HD resolution. The problem here is that we've designed in 2x scale, but here we have 1x artboard. And now everything is fine, but if you'd like to re-import assets, and you can easily do it, so let's for example go ahead and maybe change the position of this element slightly. And now you can go back to ProtoPie and you can have this file, import, and re-import from recently used. So if we re-import something, you'll discover that we have this now in 1x scale and the assets are in 2x scale. So everything is messed up. So let's press Command Z to undo it. And all you have to do is to make sure that you have the 2x scale. So let's go to Custom, and I'm going to use Custom Width, but also a density of 2. So now this is 2x scale, and even if you go back and forth from Adobe XD to ProtoPie, you can always re-import assets, even if you create and make some changes here. So this is pretty cool. The one thing that you have to be careful is changing the names of the groups and layers. So this might be messy, but if you create a nice structure in XD as we did, you'll be safe and you can import many, many times. Okay, so let's start the fun stuff. So animating in ProtoPie. Well, ProtoPie is pretty straightforward. You have the layer structure to the left, you have simple tools, as well as you have those devices and scenes that you can switch between. So for example, if you have 2 artboards in Adobe XD, you can switch between the first and second one with the scenes scheme. But instead of this, in our prototype, we're going to do everything in one scene, and we only going to animate elements so that we have elements sitting to the left-hand side, for example, and they animate through the screen. So let's hide this for a second, and I'm going to move it to the left-hand side and initiate this element from the left-hand side. So basically, the first thing you do when you try animating is to create some basic and initial states for the element. So I put this to the left-hand side because it's eventually going to go from left to right, and now I'm going to select, for example, the card items. So let's go to the right pane, And for the cart items, I'd like all the items to be invisible. And instead of simply hiding them, I'm going to change the opacity. So I've selected the items and I'm going to change the opacity. So this is way better than just changing the visibility of the layer, because we can later on animate the opacity. So this is what we're going to also do with the hints. So I'm going to change the opacity of the whole hints group as well as our product. So let's select the product group and let's make it invisible. So for the pages, we have to go inside and we have inactive and active pages. So this is slightly problematic, and this is simply because the active state is now appearing as an image. So we can't make changes individually to each of those elements. So let's go ahead and go back to XD and see what's happening here. So as you see, the active state is simply a group, so a grid that we've created. So we have to ungroup it, and if we press Command-Shift-G, we've ungrouped it, and now we group it together into another group. So this will be active state. And it seems ProtoPie doesn't really understand the repeat grid, so it makes an image out of it. But if we make a group, and now let's re-import, I'm going to go to File, Import, and re-import once more. We have another group, so the active group, and we have all the items here. So let's delete this old image. It stays there, but we can delete it. And these are actually inactive elements. So we can leave them as so, but we have to make the second and the third item in the active state invisible. So let's change the opacity. One side effect that we had from re-importing is that we have to move it once more to the left-hand side, but all the opacity changes are like prevail, and we can now start with maybe the summer description. So we're going to hide flower description. Let's change the opacity, and this is the initial state of our work. Now we can start animating things. So the way animation works in ProtoPie is pretty simple. We have two elements. First is trigger, and it basically triggers the interaction that we can create. It's fairly simple. Let's select trigger first, and we have different triggers that we'll focus on, but first let's use this start trigger. It's in the conditional group, and it basically can start any animation with the start of our scene. So let's use the start trigger, and let's create the first interaction by clicking on this plus button. Now we can move, scale, rotate, change the opacity, change the color or radius, or even make something like a vibration of our device with those interactions. So we're going to start with simple moves. Let's select move, and all it tells is that if our scene is going to start, something's going to move. And this something we have to pick from the list. So this will be a layer or a group. So we're going to go ahead and select the group, and this will be main 1. Or we can move elements independently, and we can first move summer, then model, then camp. So let's do it. And I'm going to first move summer. And in order to move it, we have to determine whether we want to have the ending position of the animation to be X or Y. So if we animate through the horizontal or vertical axis. So I want to animate the X axis, and the way I'll do it is let's Command- to see the summer, and let's mimic the behavior. So let's animate it like this. Let's move it like this. And now we have the position of 1360 pixels. I'm going to Command-Z undo it so that we have the initial state, but I'm going to go back to move. And in the X position, I'm going to put this ending position of the summer. So what we're going to do is we're going to mimic the camp animation and put it like this. So this will be X position. And we need to move this layer as well. And also we're going to select our model, and let's move it there. So this will be the X value. Let's use move for the model X, and that's it. So let's move her back in place. If you want to change the properties of the animation, you can select any of the animations, and you can change the easing. You can also change the duration and set the delay and repeating. You can do it for multiple animations if you shift-click them to select them all, and then you can change duration, for example, to 3 seconds for all the animations. If you want to preview those animations, you can do it on the device. You can download an app from Google Play or an App Store for iPad or iPhone, And you can simply scan the QR code to just see and interact with your prototype on the device, which is really cool. There's also a preview that you can use and toggle this. If you click on the preview, you'll see the animation in a separate window. And if you have two displays, it's really cool to have the preview on one and the ProtoPie on the second one, because you can see in real time all the changes that you apply. So this animation is going from the left-hand side to the right, and it lasts for 3 seconds. So we can make it even better, and let's try to see the whole pane. And let's change the timing of the animation to 2 seconds. But instead of just changing the individual timings of those animations, I can select any of the animation, for example, animation of the camp, and I can change the position so that it starts not from the beginning, but from maybe 0.5 seconds. And then I can change the position of the animation of our model so that everything is happening in different timing. Now let's press Command R to refresh the preview, and first we have summer, then camp, and then we have the model. And thanks to the easing that we've applied, we have a nice motion. So we can experiment with this easing, we can change it, and if we change it, for example, to spring, you'll see that it's very different. So we can refresh it, and we have very different motion and timing as well. So I'm going to go back and change it to ease in and out. And now let's create even more animations. So this is really easy. You can select the elements, and for example, if you want to animate this active state of the first button, so this is the first one, the second, and the third. If you want to animate it, you have to first declare that, for example, the starting state is opacity 0, but then when we start the animation, you want to change the opacity of this element, and you have to select the proper element, and if it's selected in the layers panel, it will automatically go there, and the change is going to happen, and we're going to have 100% opacity. You can also select, for example, the summer description, and let's initiate it so that it's maybe 20 pixels to the bottom. Let's press Shift and down arrow 2 times, and we're going to animate it so that it goes to Y value of 288, which is the initial value. But we're also going to change the opacity to 0, and you're going to see that it's easy to animate even 2 values of the same group. So let's first animate the opacity, and the summer description opacity will change to 100, but also we want to move it, and we want the ending point of the Y axis to land on 288. Now all the animations that we've created start immediately right after the animation starts for the scene, and they last for 0.2 seconds. So we can select them all, and maybe let's say that we want half of a second animation, and we also want to distribute the timing. So maybe the pagination will appear somewhere around here, and the opacity as well as the arrival of the text will be somewhere here where all the elements, almost all the elements are animated on the scene. So let's toggle the preview, and let's see how it looks. Okay, and it's pretty cool because now we have all the animations happening in different timings, so that we have this one, and at last this one. But simultaneously, you can see that all the animations are overlapping each other, and this is the secret for having this smooth, really nice animation sequence that will look good for user interface. Now what I'm going to do is something a bit more advanced, but first, now let's go ahead and select the hints, and we are initiating the hints with opacity 0. So let's go ahead and add this to the start sequence. I'm going to animate the opacity of the hints to 100. And later on, we're going to move this animation. But what I'd like to do also is to change the scaling of this element. So I want to go to hints properties, but there is unfortunately no scale property. What I can do though is I can change the origin so that I have the transformation origin in the center. And now when I use the scale property, they will scale from the center, which is cool. But I can't scale them within the properties. What I can do is I can initiate with another interactivity. So I can create, for example, the scaling behavior at the beginning of the scene, and I can scale through the factor, and let's scale them to 130%. So this will be initiated, and later on we'll change the opacity. So first we'll scale them up, then we'll change the opacity. So let's move it to the right hand side, And yeah, let's put it there. This will be the final animation. So after everything is ready on stage, we'll start the animation. We can expand the animation and change the duration like so. And we're also going to change the scale here. So let's add another scale animation for the hints. And this time we're going to go back to 100% scale. And we're going to do it simultaneously with the opacity change. So this is a neat trick where you can animate anything at the beginning and it's not visible, but then you animate back like so. Let's toggle the preview and let's see if it works. And the hints are appearing. And they are appearing from the top, left, and the bottom. So it looks pretty cool, like they are moving independently. Okay, now let's go back and create some more advanced interactions. So what we want to do is we want to create the interaction within the hint. So if someone hovers or clicks on the hint 1, which we'll name just, maybe let's stick to hint 1, but we're going to rename the other ones. This will be hint 2, and this is going to be hint 3. So if someone hits the hint 1, we're going to create the action that will trigger the product to appear. Okay, so let's add another trigger, and if the hint is selected, we can simply say tab, or maybe even mouse over. You have to be careful. If you're doing this for touch-enabled devices, you'll eventually use tab, but we're doing this for desktop, so we can use mouse over. And if you mouse over hint 1, you can add the interactivity, which will be connected to another element, which is product, and we're gonna change the opacity of the product. So we have to make sure that the product is selected here. So this concept that we've discovered right now is extremely important in ProtoPie, because you can basically make one object, this hint 1, activate the other objects and make changes to opacity or movement or anything to multiple objects at a time, because we can add some more responses to that as well. So now we are using hint 1 to basically activate our product. And let's see if that works. Let's check out the preview. Let's see if we can hover over this element. Well, it doesn't work. And it simply doesn't work because we've changed the stacking order of the items. And now product is on top of the hints. So if we try to mouse over the hints, we are actually mousing over the product. This can be easily fixed. You can select the product and you can go ahead and select its properties, and at the bottom you have allow touch to affect lower layers. If you select that and check it in the preview, it's basically saying this product object to be invisible for the interactions. And now if you hover over this little dot, you can see that the product is appearing. Okay, now let's select the product itself and create another trigger. So the trigger for the product will be dragging. So we will be able to drag the product. And if you select drag, well, you can make any other element to be, for example, scaled when this object is dragging. But what we want to do is we just want to move the same element. So we want to move product when we drag product. And we can move bidirectional or just in one direction. I'm going to move bidirectional, and let's see if that works. So we have to still watch the animation, and now we can hover over and we can drag this element. Okay, so things are starting to be a little bit more complicated, but I think it's still the simplest way to put it. Okay, now we're going to create even more sophisticated action because we want to detect if someone is moving this product, and if he is, we want to take the right pane and we want to animate it up. So let's go back and let's check the position of the product. We have the X position of 754. So why don't we add another trigger, and this time we're going to use range. So this is one of the conditionals that is in very few prototyping tools. So you can add the range for pixels and you can determine the specific area or specific movement type of the property. So for example, this time we can use X position and we can check if the product X position has changed so that it was moved, for example, to the right, to the left in a specific area. And we can say that we want to check if it moved to 755 pixel. So if someone moves it, we'll have the action that if 755 is less than or equal of the X of our product, we can do something. and the something will be animation of the right pane. So we want to animate the Y property of the right pane so that it goes up like this. Let's copy this value and let's Command Z undo it. Let's add the movement for the right pane, and we want it to land at minus 630. Let's go ahead and check the preview. Now let's grab it, and if I start dragging this, you'll see the animation is happening. So it's really cool. It's amazing. Now what we want to do is we want to take this back. So if we release, we want this product to go back to its spot, and we want the animation to play the opposite way. So this will be fairly easy because we have another action that we can create for the product. So let's add the trigger of touch up. So if someone releases this element, so stop dragging, we can add the movement. So we can move it back to its place. So let's see the initial position of this product element. It's the 754x value, and so let's move the product to x 754, and let's change the opacity of the product so it goes down to 0. Okay, so it has to change to 0, and also what we're gonna do is move the pane that we have here. So let's select the right pane, and it will land on y0 because it's the initial state of this element. So let's see if that works. I'm gonna move it, and now I'm gonna release it. Okay, so something's wrong here. Okay, because it goes to the exact x position, but not y position. So we need to set the y position as well of the movement. So let's check the y position of the product, and it's exactly this value. We have to put it in the y position. So now it's gonna work fine. Let's check out. Now I'm hovering. Let's release it, and it works. But wait, there is more. And now we're gonna enter even more untouched territory. So we're gonna check whether this guy is inside of the card, and if it's released in the card, we are actually gonna add the product to the card. And if it's released outside of the card, we're simply gonna take it back like so. So let's go to ProtoPie and let's think of how we can do it. So basically, if we start moving this product, not the mask group, but the product, we are changing the values. So what we want to focus on is the x position, and I want to check whether the x position is to the right hand of this point. Okay, so let's check the position x. It's 1388. We can even copy that from here so that you can see clearly what I'm talking about. And if it's there or more, I want to create a different animation. So let's now go back to the touch up event, and it fires when someone stops dragging. So when someone releases the left mouse button. And now we want to react differently depending on whether the product is to the left of this line or to the right of this line. And we're going to achieve it with the condition. We can add the condition here, and we can check the different values and whether they are, for example, bigger or equal to something. So if it's bigger or equal to this very pixel, and the pixel value was 1388. By the way, you can check different properties of different layers here. So you can say you want to compare, for example, this layer's width to some other layer's value of something. But this time we're going to keep it simple, and we want to check whether product x, and here you have this quotation, x of product is more or equal to 1388. And if this condition is met, we are going to trigger some things that are below. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the right pane, so let's set the right pane, y position is set to, where is it? Okay, it's minus 630, so it stays up, okay? And also we're going to trigger another animation. So we're going to show the product. We're going to set the opacity of the product. Where is the product? Inside of the card we have the item 1. We're going to change the opacity to 100. Let's preview that. Let's see if it's working. So I'm going to drag it, and now if I release somewhere here or somewhere here, we have another animation. But if I go further to the right hand side and I just put it here, I'm gonna have this super cool glasses added to my cart. So this is really amazing. Now let's go back to ProtoPie and make some cooler animation. We need to hide this element, this drop element. So let's also use the opacity of drop element and change it to 0. And maybe we'll have the animation at the start here. We're gonna mock up another animation. So maybe 3D rotation of this item 1. So we're going to initiate it with the 3D rotation that will be not visible at all, but we're going to rotate by maybe 60 degrees. And let's use maybe this kind of rotation. And now we're going to flip it. So here we're going to use the same 3D rotation, but we're going to use the other way around, and we're going to use 60 here as well. So this should result in really cool animation that will allow us to add something to the cart. Okay, so now glasses appear like from the top and they go to the bottom with this 3D animation. So you can go from there and you can just, possibilities are endless. But one more thing I'd like to show you, one more like mind-blowing thing, is that you can also change the elements like this price. Unfortunately, we have the price that came from Adobe XD, which is basically an image, but we can delete it and we can add some text. So yeah, let's make sure that the text is added somewhere here to the cart. And I'm going to put $0 and we can change the properties of the text here. So let's make it bigger. Okay, and also bold. And I'm going to put it to the right-hand side like so. Okay, and now what we're going to do is let's change this to price, the name of this text layer. And in case someone adds something to the basket, for example, the glasses, I'm going to add another thing that will be connected to text. And what we can do here is select this price, which is the very one text frame that we have here, and we can change the price to say 450. And let's see if that works. Let's check the preview. Now we need to drag the glasses again and put them inside of the cart, and let's check the price. Now it's 0, but when I put it here, it's 450. Okay, so let's get back to ProtoPie and we can just like tweak it forever. But we won't do it because my point in this lesson was to show you the potential of ProtoPie, and in the minimum amount of time, I wanted to show you the most of it. So you can take what we've done and you can now expand it. You can create some more sophisticated animations, but you'll discover that 80 or 90% of the time you'll be doing exactly the same things that we've done in this lesson. So I wanted to show you the diversity of ProtoPie, and this is really one of the few prototyping tools that allow you to create some complicated things, like the things that base on one thing and do the other. So you can create both conditions, or you can create something that is called chain trigger. There is a chain trigger. I didn't show you the chain trigger, but basically what you can do is you can have one element, for example, moving, and depending on this movement, you can make the other element scaling or something like this. And you can also, which is unique for ProtoPie, use a lot of sensors. You can use tilt, you can use sound, compass, 3D touch in your device. So this is really amazing. One thing that is also great is that you can receive and use this conditional trigger to connect two devices together. So for example, if you are creating a mockup for a messenger app, you can have one phone that is used to send the message, and you can receive the message and create the animation on the other phone. So this is freaking awesome. So this is where you can finish this lesson, or you can take a look at one more lesson on Learn.ux.io, where I'll show you some even cooler things that you can do to this prototype. So I spent a bit more time on it, and let me see what we've got here. We have the first collection and then the second one. And also we have some cool animations here. We have this guy changing the size, and if we take the glasses and we are close to the cart, we also have a nice animation going on here. So this is like just more to it, but we are using almost the same things and features. So If you want to check that out, you can go to the next lesson on Learn UX. And if you want to explore ProtoPie in your own pace, just do it. And I encourage you to send me the result. I'll be happy to see what you've done with it. And I'll see you in the next lessons.